Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio, radio, no pictures live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast, and listen to it, say, in your car as you're driving along, or your truck, or on public transport. Put in those earbuds. Now, in this essay, I'd like to talk about the French election and how the globalist cabal closed ranks in order to stop the election, the likely election into the Chamber of Deputies, like the Parliament in France, so that Marine Le Pen's party was probably going to get, if not an outright majority, certainly they'd be the biggest party by a long shot. And they would probably take the position of prime minister. And just in the French system, you've got sort of quite a powerful president, really, and a parliament that has sort of day-to-day policy, administrative type powers, but the major powers, and particularly powers of veto, lie with the president. So now, if Marine Le Pen's party had won the majority, or at least had nominal or outright control of the Chamber of Deputies, then there would have been some very substantial changes to things like migration policy, what to do with illegal immigrants, this sort of thing. This terrified the globalists. I mean, if anything is a centerpiece of the globalist project, anything at all, mass migration of third world peasants into the first world is their centerpiece. And this, they cannot tolerate that being compromised or threatened or watered down or diluted in any way. If anything will drive them sort of crazy, then that's it. And we see this operating in France. Now, there are two rounds to the elections in France. And if for any candidate seeking election and in their electoral district they get an outright majority of 50% plus, then they're elected. But the purpose of a second round is to ensure that everybody who's sitting in the parliament got more than 50% of the votes in their electoral district. So if there are a number of contenders in the first round of voting and nobody gets an outright 50% plus majority, then they go to a second round of voting. So that's the purpose of it, if you like. So in the first round, the Marine Le Pen's anti-immigration party. When I say anti-immigration, they're actually not anti-immigration. If you sort of study their policies, they want skilled migration. They don't want millions of illiterate third world peasants coming into France. Like any sensible person, they want if somebody speaks French and they're skilled and they've got credentials and qualifications and they want to come to France and become part of French society and integrate into French society, then they're more than welcome. And Marine Le Pen's party is in favour of all that, that sort of migration. There's not that many people that fulfil that requirement, but it doesn't matter. If you speak French, you're skilled, you want to come and be part of French society, then you're more than welcome. The issue is with masses of illiterate peasants that have no intention of becoming part of French society and have no thought to integrating in French society, bring no skills, have no qualifications. They bring nothing to the table other than wanting to access France's social welfare handouts and so on. Now, so that needs to be said. Le Pen's party is attacked by the globalist-controlled media as not wanting any immigration, and so that's not true. Simply not true. But let's have a look at the tactics here that are used to undermine the will of the people, to undermine democracy, and to undermine the democratic process. Now, the globalists have a lot of form in this. If you look at say the 2020 presidential election. Approximately 20 plus, around 20 to 22 million, depending on how you want to add it up, but 20 to 22 million votes were really in dispute there. And the dispute was chain of custody, that is, whenever votes are moved from one location to another for counting or simply moving around, that they had a chain of somebody was signing to receive them. I received 10,000, or I received 10 boxes of votes or 10,000 votes, or whatever, and then moved to the next location, and then finally to the central collation and adding up and counting centre. There were millions of votes that didn't have a chain of custody. So, extra votes could have been added in or taken out, or nobody knows. There just wasn't a. The second thing was the, excuse me, because of the COVID thing, there are a lot of mail-in ballots, and there was no signature matching. So you're supposed to, before it's a legitimate legal vote, what's supposed to happen is the election officials look at the signature on record and then match it to the signature on the envelope when the vote was posted in. They didn't do this, and again, many millions of votes weren't signature checked. Now, in the strict sort of letter of the law, you're not supposed to count those votes because they can't be in a sense of audit probity. They can't be verified. So, but they were counted, and wouldn't you know it, they were nearly all for Joe Biden. So the reality is that instead of the 81 million votes that Joe Biden allegedly got, he got somewhere between 59 and 61 million in reality, and 20 million odd votes were just simply added in by use of these various and other devices, but the main ones being chain of custody and the mail-in ballots and multiple voting, all those sorts of things. So this is the form that the globalists have, and the lengths they're prepared to go to, the amount of people they're prepared to compromise. And now the other thing too about the US presidential election, typically the election gets somewhere in the order of 135 million votes, give or take. This is recently and with current, and mostly there's quite a clear winner. There are exceptions to that. John Kennedy's win in 1960, or George Bush and Al Gore, or was it year 2000, I think. But most of the time there's 3, 4, 5 million votes separating the winner from the loser. Now, in the case of the Biden vote, miraculously over 20 million new voters just suddenly appeared, just out of nowhere. 20 million new voters suddenly appeared, and again, wouldn't you know it, they all voted for Biden. Like, wow. And these 20 million votes were all tied up in the disputed. So very, very suspicious. If you were any election official, if you were concerned with probity and electoral standards and electoral integrity, you would investigate that thoroughly. But no one ever did. And that's probably one of the most remarkable things, I think, from that presidential election. It was never investigated. I mean, if I was the election official, that I would have been the first thing I'd have gone after. Not because I like or dislike this or that candidate, but because issues of integrity and probity were obviously at play here. And this is what happened with the re-election in France. The turnout of voters was supposedly magically very high. Now, this was touted by the globalist media. Well, look, the reason these extra voters came because they wanted to keep out the far right. They were going to stop the Nazis. They were going to stop Hitler. Of course, that's absolute nonsense. Were these votes genuine and legitimate? I would question it. So the first thing they did to undermine I would allege, in my opinion, is to suddenly there's a huge turnout of voters that hitherto didn't vote. Now, there have been very dramatic elections in the past where the issues have been the issues have been of national consideration and people are getting worked up about it, but somehow there was an unusually high turnout of voters here. Again, that was sold as people, look, they were good people coming out to stop those bad people. Now, as soon as you hear that narrative being pushed, and it's being pushed all over by the globalist media, then that's nonsense. People dressed up in Che Guevara costumes are supposed to be the good people. The people rioting and setting fire to buildings are the good people. Yes, sure they are. Now, but the most sort of the lengths they went to in terms of tactical voting on a per electoral district, per electoral seat, or was what was probably more interesting than anything else. Now, after the first round of voting again for the Chamber of Deputies in France, it looked like Marine Le Pen's party would, if not get an outright majority, would come very close to it. So somewhere between 260 seats to say 310, 320 seats. And you need, I think it was 290 to get a majority. So that was that's how, if you looked at just mathematically, if you did the projections, it would come out somewhere in that range. This horrified the establishment, because one of the first things her party was going to do was restrict migration to skilled migration. And this, if anything is going to strike terror into the heart of these ardent globalists, it's anything to do with immigration control. So they want open slather and only into the first world countries, by the way. This is interestingly why they hate Putin so much. He won't have anything to do with that nonsense, and so he's not towing the line. He's got to go. So that's part of that narrative there. But just coming back to the French thing, so they looked at the first round, the globalist cabal, and Macron is not an independent sovereign president. He's a globalist stooge flunky. They looked at the outcome of the first round of the election in the Chamber of Deputies, and they thought, holy crap, Le Pen's probably going to win a majority. Holy crap, this is going to be the end of our open slather on mass migration. It's going to screw up everything. It may even be the end of the European Union, which is a centerpiece, a vital part of the globalist project. So Le Pen winning is going to threaten the globalist project in as much as the EU, and in the mass migration, we cannot allow her to win. Screw the French people. Screw what they vote for. We cannot allow her to win. The globalist project will not allow Le Pen to win. And this was really, as I would see it, the thinking that went in it. So they looked at, well, what can we do? Sure, they can invent a certain amount of votes, as I'm convinced they did, with these supposedly extra people magically appearing to come and vote. I think there was that. But also there was the tactics used, and I would assert this was election interference on a grand scale. So the globalists looked at some 200 electoral districts where they thought Le Pen's party could win these seats. There were some that were so far in Le Pen's favour that they couldn't stop it, but they looked at around 200. Remember, there's 650 or something deputies in the parliament, or 590. Anyway, whatever it is, somewhere in the 600 range, and they went to a third of the seats, 200 seats, and they looked at tactically, how could they prevent Le Pen's candidate from getting across the line, getting the 50% needed? So they looked at say, there's multiple candidates standing in each of these electoral districts. They went to a number of candidates and said, look, you're taking votes away from, Emmanuel Macron's party, for example. You're taking votes away from a leftist party, and you're diluting the votes, which gives Le Pen's party a better chance of winning. But if you stand down, if you just decide to quit the electoral race, not field a candidate or not stand for it, then you're going to increase the chance that Macron's party will get enough votes to come first. Will you do that for us? Now, this is the globalists just coming, saying not we're supporting democracy, we're doing this, we're doing that. They're actually going to people to say, will you help us subvert democracy? Will you help us subvert the will of the people? Will you help us do this? And I'm surprised that they got so many people to go along with it. What did they do? Did they bribe them? Did they offer them, hot-looking escort girls for the night or something? Did they offer them cozy jobs or pensions. I don't know. How could they have got that many people? Because it was something that amazed me about the American presidential election, that how many electoral officers would go along with the rigging of the election. I was staggered by that. I thought you get one or two, but they were able to install electoral officers that were not only happy to go along with it, but were aggressively in support of rigging the election. I was staggered by that. But anyway, coming back to France now, so they were able to get many candidates. I don't know how many at the end of the day, but many candidates in each of the electoral districts to stand down, and thereby reduce the chance that Le Pen's party could come first or get an outright majority. So now I don't know how many. I mean, I did some back of the envelope calculations, and the best I could come up with was Le Pen's party would have got about 272 seats in the Chamber of Deputies, making them by far and away the bigger party. And they got the most votes. I think they beat the next highest by 5 or 6%, the next one by 11+%, and so on. So they're quite a way in front. And rural France in particular voted for them. The bigger cities tended to vote for the communists and so on. Now, interestingly, the communists, who were supposed to be concerned with French worker rights and French worker wages and French workers' living conditions and standard of living, they have a manifesto which is fully in support of globalist mass migration. In fact, they want to extend it. They want to increase it. They want to give more benefits to illegal immigrants, the left. So they're aligning with the globalist, Macron's globalist party, which is completely controlled, directed and instructed by the globalists. And then they've got now an alliance with the far left that somehow is suddenly now in support of trashing the standard of living of actual French heritage citizen workers. I struggle to comprehend that one. So I mean, Che Guevara wasn't in favour of bringing in masses of people to Cuba. Far from it. So they've got these people to stand down in these electoral districts in France to minimise the chance of Marine Le Pen winning. I think they denied, out of the 200 districts that they fiddled and rigged, I think they denied Le Pen something in the order of 125 to 130 seats, somewhere in that region, I think. So we've got to really look at this and say the globalist machinations were a stunning success in terms of keeping Le Pen away from. Because if you've got a party that's that big, they're the biggest party by far, then unless you get an alliance of every other single party in the Chamber of Deputies, which would be impossible, then you have to appoint someone from Le Pen's party as the Prime Minister, and then you get the issues with changing the Migration Act and these sorts of things. But this is the extent of the levels that they went to. They phantom invented a whole lot of suddenly new voters appearing, and I don't believe that actually did happen. And if these voters were suddenly concerned and they weren't before, that's bullshit. And again, they fiddle the electoral districts by tactically arranging the voting in such a way as it would minimise the chances of an anti-globalist or anti-immigration party getting a majority. Now, this is the extent. This is the power the globalists have to subvert elections and subvert democracy. And looking at the recent election in Britain, where 5 Reform Party, and these are anti-immigration, 5 Reform Party candidates got elected, and they were under a withering attack in the media from all sides. The media were attacking them as being Nazis and everything like that. I mean, the usual stuff, and yet at the same time, 5 Muslim candidates were elected to Parliament in Muslim areas, and their only concern is Muslim issues in Gaza, and you know they make no bones about we are Muslims voting for Muslims. Muslim issues, you know, we don't care about Britain, we don't care about anything. We only care about Muslim issues, and they got elected, but the media didn't give them a hard time. In fact, nothing, barely any mention at all. Yet and the reason being is the Muslim candidates are in favour of increasing and extending mass migration, and do and fully support that sort of thing. It's only the Reform Party, Nigel Farage, where they're against it, and suddenly they're being attacked at all sides. And I'd be very surprised if there weren't shenanigans there in terms of ensuring that they didn't win more representation in Parliament. But they're the only ones that are demonised. The Muslim candidates, or the Muslim members of Parliament, because they've now been elected, they aren't being demonised at all in any way. So coming back, the issue here is then mass migration. That's the common denominator here. Trump wanted to stop mass migration. We got to stop Trump. Marine Le Pen in France wants to stop mass migration. We got to stop Marine Le Pen. Nigel Farage in Reform wants to stop mass migration. We have to stop them, and so on. And this is the architecture of the international globalist cabal, and how they interact with and deal with supposedly democratic elections. They're subverting democracy at every turn, whilst very deceitfully claiming that they're actually defending it. You've been with Tassos today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.